Hey everyone, welcome back to our third annual SBA Innovation Ecosystem Summit. I think we have some new faces, so allow me to quickly reset the room. My name is Jamila Corbett, Engagement Director at Established on behalf of the SBA. Thank you for being here. We're so happy that you've decided to join us today. And if you've been with us all day, thank you for still being here. If you enjoy sessions like these, we actually host monthly calls with ecosystem builders like yourself. To learn more and to sign up, please visit americaseedfund.us. I just want to remind everyone that this event has closed captions. If you need it, just click the CC button at the bottom. If you experience any technical difficulties at any point, first take a deep breath, then try refreshing your screen. That usually takes care of the issue. Otherwise, email support@est.us and we'll do our best to troubleshoot. We also encourage you to share your learnings and highlights with us on social media using the hashtag ESO Summit 2023 and Seed the Future. All right, let's resume the party. For this final session of the day, you're going to hear from federally funded organizations and leadership from SBA's Office of Field Operations on how they build support for ecosystem building at the state and local level. To lead this discussion is Stacy Swider, VP of Investments at Mass Ventures. With that said, Stacy, take us away.
Hi, and thank you for that, Jamila, and thank you for having us here. As she said, I'm Stacy Swider. I'm a VP Investments of Mass Ventures. We are the state of Massachusetts's strategic venture capital arm. Most states have an equivalent of Mass Ventures, so part of your startup ecosystem is understanding all of your quasis, including you probably have a venture one and a clean energy one like we do. We have a life sciences facing one. So there's a lot of different quasis to get to know. But we have some interesting people to listen to on this panel who have really helped to build up ecosystems. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and then we will get into some fun discussions. Tony, why don't we start with you?
Hey, Stacy. I am Tony Sodella. I'm the chair of the Drug API Innovation Center. It's the Active Pharmaceutical Ingredient Innovation Center. And the center is dedicated to securing our nation's drug supply chain by advancing the adoption of novel manufacturing innovations, and in doing so, growing the manufacturing job base in the state of Missouri.
That's quite an ecosystem for Missouri. Jason, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Stacy. So Jason Rittenberg, I'm Vice President with SSTI. We're a national association working with state governments, local and regional nonprofits that are focused on economic development in their regions, institutions of higher education, and national labs. And we're working with groups that are really trying to expand the research, innovation, entrepreneurship activity in their regions and helping to translate that activity into new products, companies, and jobs. So work with 160 plus groups around the country on those types of issues, tracking policies, programs, and practices that are proving effective.
Yeah, that's great. And Mass Ventures loves working with SSTI. And also on our panel is Jen Kim with the SBA. Can you tell us about your work there, Jen, and who you are?
Thanks, Stacey. Hi, everybody. My name is Jen Kim. I'm the Associate Administrator for the Office of Field Operations here at the SBA. I want to thank my colleagues at the Office of Investment and Innovation for hosting such a great event. My role is I oversee our regional and district offices. So we kind of think of ourselves as many front doors to the agency all across the country. And I can talk a little bit more about how we're set up in a few minutes. And I'm based in Washington, D.C.
Wonderful. That is great to hear. And this is a large topic for a very short session. So we're going to get right into it. And the topic, just to repeat, is that there are a lot of federal vehicles, for building. You can apply for EDA grants and other grants for building an ecosystem in your state, but you also need to pull in those state resources. So we're going to be focusing a bit on how you do that. And I'm going to circle right back to Tony. Tony, you've been successful, very successful in the state of Missouri. I think you shared with me yesterday that you've won $30 million. How did you accomplish all of that? Oh, please unmute yourself.
Yes, really important elements relative to being able to get state funding through the type of efforts. Really three things. The first is ensuring strategic fit with the state's priorities. The second thing that was important was the impact of our efforts on the local economy and local communities. And the third thing that was essential was a plan to be self-sustaining. So upon receiving those state funds, how would be self-sustaining and allow those investments, if you want to view them that way, to be scaled. So for example, in the state of Missouri, expanding manufacturing was a top priority for the state and the governor. State of Missouri is number 4 manufacturing base in the nation by state. It's the number 1 drug active pharmaceutical producer by state in the United States. And so there was a natural, perfect strategic fit with the objectives of the state with our API Innovation Center's purpose. From an impact on local economy and communities, the focus was on driving economic prosperity by creating new type of manufacturing jobs across different and diverse communities and regions. For example, our efforts were focused on creating new novel jobs around quality assurance and quality control with different type of backgrounds, different type of degree backgrounds. In addition, we were able to grow regions like St. Louis, the city of St. Louis, which has a proud history of manufacturing for over 100 years, that had experienced a disproportionate amount of growth in other regions. So the ability to meet the state's objectives of growing regions, growing local economy, and growing communities. And then the last part I said about being self-sustaining. There was definitely a requirement that gave greater confidence in the state supporting us, which was a plan to be self-sustaining with the initial funding from the state level. We fund small businesses, innovators, academic to commercialize their technologies, but we've also developed a novel joint value capture partnership with all these innovators so that the center itself could be sustaining, scale, and have widespread impact locally, regionally, and even nationally within drug supply chain.
Okay, we all need to go online and look at what you built at the API Innovation Center. So I hope you guys all caught that. It's about aligning with the state's goals, provide jobs, states want to get jobs, and make it a sustainable ecosystem. And all of these, particularly around the state's missions, these things you can start out by just looking online. The states often publish these in their economic development plans, and it's incumbent on you as a person who wants to grow an ecosystem to take the time to read, educate yourself, and get to know people. Jason, I'd like to hear what you could add to this, that you work with across many states, and what are some other things you see?
So one of the big things that we see people that are in this space and really interested in trying to build that state support for their innovation programs is trying to get in with the state legislature and the executive office to help create the funding opportunities and priorities that are going to then align with initiatives that funded the one like the API Innovation Center. So I believe at least part of that funding came through Missouri Tech Corps. And so as an example there, that's a state that has had an organization that has a really great history of funding important innovation work in the state, but its funding and its overall priority and the governor's plans have shifted over time with various administrations. And so I know that in Missouri, there are groups that come together to try to educate the state's leaders on the importance of having a regional innovation strategy. And that's something that many other states do as well, and is very important because a lot of times governors, like any elected official, they're going to have priorities that may be in different areas. They may be more focused on infrastructure at some points or on housing issues. And then even when it comes to economic development, a lot of times people are going to be more used to the kind of economic development funding where you're giving incentives to a larger manufacturer, that there is going to be a ribbon cutting at some point and a couple of hundred jobs. And so it takes a lot of education to explain why funding investments in longer term outputs through science and tech and entrepreneurship can pay really important and valuable dividends for the state as a whole, for the people of the state, and then hopefully also there can be some sort of more shorter term benefits that align with the elected officials, because sometimes that is an important priority. So we've worked with a lot of states over time, including actually talking with Mass Ventures, then also universities in Alabama, for example, and universities as well as innovation-focused organizations in Iowa, to help think about what metrics do you have about how your programs work, what success stories can you share about the impact that science and tech have had for people and companies. And then how do you put together a plan to figure out when the important time is to go and talk with those elected officials? There are certainly things like a regular budget cycle or the development of an economic development plan, like you mentioned, Stacy, that are really great times. But, also, when does your annual report come out? Or do you have a pitch competition that you can invite people to, and other types of activities? And then remembering that you need to do this frequently. Everyone's busy. People get asked for a lot of things all the time. So it's not a matter of, hey, I talked to them last year, so now they should definitely want to support our ask next time. It's how many reminders can you provide and help keeping the importance of the work that you're doing in the front of people's minds. So just at a high level, those are a few recommendations and a few ways that we see different states getting involved to try to really build support. The one other thing I forgot to mention that I definitely want to make sure I don't forget is using clear language. Every field has its own jargon. I think science and tech can be particularly bad about that. And SBIR versus America's Seed Fund, those are not terms that are clear to people. So making sure that you are really using descriptive language that maybe doesn't even say the program name, but at least says what it does very clearly to a lay audience is important as part of your outreach strategies too.
Jason, that is incredibly insightful and just wonderful advice, because part of what you're saying is that when you're looking at building an ecosystem community, what you're competing with the politicians or servants at the state level is a quick win. They want to just write that check, and then there's 100 new jobs and they get a good article in the newspaper, versus, some of the things Tony was saying, like jobs of tomorrow, and really supporting and having this sustainable place. So they get it. And then it brings come back to your communication point, 200%. Learn how to communicate, hire help to communicate, and then stay on it. I want to pivot to Jen now and let her share with us the work that she helps grease the rails for, I guess, in all the states.
First, maybe just let me describe a little bit more about the field operation structure, so you kind of know what's out there across the country. And then I'll talk a little bit more specifically about how that relates to ecosystem building. But my job, I like to think I've got one of the best jobs at SBA. I get to the privilege of overseeing our field operations. So that includes 10 regional offices that are led by 10 regional administrators, as well as 68 district offices across the country. And so every state has at least one, including in Puerto Rico. We've got staff in Guam and other places. And some of the larger states like California, Texas, et cetera, we have multiple offices there. And then, these offices are staffed with some of the most dedicated, hardworking people I've ever met. And they're just, really, experts in their own field, right? Subject matter experts. And so, every office has a mix of staff. Of course, they're led by our district directors and deputy district directors, but we have lending relations specialists across the country whose job it is to focus on access to capital, working with SBA affiliated lenders, as well as the borrowers that are benefiting from those lenders. We have business opportunity specialists that work on contracting. And then we have outreach and marketing and economic development specialists as well, whose, their job especially is to kind of create that ecosystem. But all this is to say that, no matter who you encounter in one of our district offices, they're very committed to helping small businesses of, every industry, of every geography, find what they need to get to that next step. And so it could be with one of us, it could be with one of our SBA resource partners, so our small business development centers, or our local SCORE chapters that have free counseling. It could be that actually you need to communicate with a state level agency or a different federal agency or whatever it is. But, now to kind of address that ecosystem component, we kind of see ourselves as conveners, wayfinders, navigators, depending on what the need is. And we're really, all of our local staff are very well connected with state and local governments, as well as the other federal agencies out there. So if you haven't already kind of looked to see what's around you locally, you can go to sba.gov/local-assistance. And I think you can just type in your city or your zip code and you can see what's around you. But again, even if it's not in your city, there is a district office that covers you. You can make a virtual appointment. But, our staff are, ready to help businesses at every stage of life, really. But I think, the key thing about being a small business, as you guys know, is kind of the larger the coalition, the larger the group that you're with, helps to kind of grow the power of small businesses. SBA is celebrating its 70th anniversary this year. And I think, one of the things that was key at our founding, when President Eisenhower signed us into law, is like, how can we keep small businesses competitive against those big businesses? And so that's our whole agency focus. That's what we're working on locally. And so, our resources are out there to help you.
And where all the cool small businesses are, and it's so important to pull in these offices to your ecosystem effort, because you're finding those other friends. That's just amazing. And we're so lucky to have all these regional and local offices. Back to Tony, I want to dig in a little bit to funding. So you want to make something sustainable. You're sort of pitching the state. What are some of the instruments you use to get going?
Well, I think one of the key was building the appropriate partnerships that could scale. So even though you're working with small businesses per se to help them scale their innovation, it requires small, large, and also entities and organizations at the adjacencies. So the ability to bring what I'll call consortiums together on given projects that allows, in essence, the small business to grow and flourish, allowed for novel value capture models. And so by that, I mean, we de-risk for these small businesses and large businesses the adoption of new technologies. So that's where we deploy the capital that the state has put in place, the de-risking of allowing these new novel advanced manufacturing technologies to be brought to market and placed in an existing manufacturer or a small business manufacturer that can scale. In doing that, we form good, strong partnerships with them that allow them to thrive and them to also allow the center to capture some value back. So we built a business model, commercial partnership model with these organizations. And it's not just one, it's the large business. In our case, we have small businesses that are innovating, developing new techniques. But we have large enterprises and corporations that have built some other augmenting technologies, or large corporations with different type of facilities in Missouri to produce some of these final drugs. And them all work together, finding an equitable value share model is what allowed us to do that. Now, I will say, I think we're somewhat unique in that we have a topic that crosses both sides. We've had no challenges from both sides of the political spectrum. Everybody's committed to ensuring that our citizens have access to quality drug products that are manufactured here in the United States to allow for a security of supply. And in doing so, we get a lot of purpose and meaning to what we're doing, and the collaborations come together quite powerfully.
Yeah, it's so important to have the bigs in there. They just have so much know-how, and they often want to come in because of the workforce development. They often have a lot of grinding needs in hiring, and so that's a great way to sort of start pulling everybody together. Jen, what kind of funding instruments can ecosystem builders look for? Often people start with a federal one and then they get the matching from the state. Do they start at grants.gov, or where do they look?
Yeah, the good news is there's no shortage of opportunities right now. You might have to look in a couple of different places, but under President Biden, there's just an incredible amount of funding that's going into all sorts of different fields. I think, there's innovators on this at this event today from all different sectors. So I'll just say that, whether it's under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, there's a lot of opportunity out there, and there are some, set-asides, for lack of a better term, for small businesses. And locally, we are trying to connect those dots for folks as well. Every state has what's called an infrastructure czar, whose job it is to try to kind of like traffic cop some of those opportunities locally, and try to work with the different state and local entities as well, because some of that model funding is federal funding, but a lot of it actually is getting pushed down to state and local entities as well. And I'll just say, while like a lot of opportunities are already out there and have been issued, the awards and notices will continue to come, well into next year as well, for sure. So, again, a lot of our local offices are working to connect the dots on some of those opportunities. But even if, they're not working on your specific thing, maybe they know of somebody else that is. But grants.gov is a good place for sure. If it's contracting related, hopefully you're registered on sam.gov already. But again, if you can find kind of who in your state is kind of managing or coordinating those state funds, that can, I think, be a big help for you all. And, again, our local folks, our regional administrators especially, are trying to make sure that we're connecting with like Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, et cetera, to kind of build those ecosystems locally. So, we try to cut down on the number of people you have to talk to.
That's a really important point. And and also, right, it's not all through the SBA, it's through Commerce, it's through Department of Energy, it might be through OSHA, not OSHA, sorry, NOAA. Like if it's oceanographic, I'm on the East Coast, there's a lot of ocean stuff going on.
Could be anybody, really.
It could be anybody.
That's a good point. We actually don't have we're not issuing the funding to small businesses ourselves, but, our goal is to make sure that small businesses are kind of aware of all the different opportunities across the federal government.
And I could say, Stacy, just to add to Jen's comment, is that our center and all the jobs and all the scaling that are being created in Missouri to produce these new medicines using US-based derived innovations would not have been possible had it not been for the SBA. The SBA's investment in the Research Innovation Center that got it started, allowed us to create an environment and then to create an ecosystem. It would not have happened. And that further attracted further support by the state, and therefore further support by other entities, including commercial entities. And it was the SBA that, through their stepping forward, their foresight to see that their funding of a RIC around this area was an enabler to get us to have our drug supply chain. So we wouldn't exist if it hadn't been for their great work.
I love that point. I see it all the time. The federal government is often more daring than state government. And so they're much more willing to seed things. And then when you show the value, you can show the value, hire Jason's firm to communicate the value, and then you can start getting the state support. There is, we're getting some good audience questions. And it's coming back to Tony. There's interest in learning more about the business model that you use. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but talk briefly.
Yeah, well, in kind of a high level, by choosing to deploy the state funding for the research and de-risking of the technology, what companies then are doing is receiving a technology that they know is proven. And when we talk de-risk for drugs, it's that the FDA will approve it, that it's made according to quality standards, that it technically works. So a whole wide variety of different types of risks. So by de-risking it, we're committing to allow that to be, in essence, paid for. The state of Missouri is funding that. But then on the follow-on is when we bring those drug products, we seek to share in the product being brought to market. So we take a small percentage of the product that gets commercialized. It's a nonprofit. We're not looking for anything beyond something that allows us to self-sustain. Now, what's been really remarkable is that others want to see our funds go further. And as such, we've been getting others, private companies, commercial entities saying, don't consume all of it on this or this product only. we want to stretch it even further. So it's been really a collaborative model. And, you know, to the point that Jason made, Missouri does have a really great collaborative ecosystem for growth and for supporting it between large organizations and small businesses. And that really has been demonstrated as part of our RIC.
That's fantastic. And the next question, you said you have a not-for-profit. And the next question was about your likelihood of getting funding if you are not for profit. Jason, could you take that one? You must see a lot of not-for-profits.
Yeah, I mean, most of the groups that we work with are nonprofit organizations. So, I mean, like Jen was mentioning, there are an awful lot of federal programs, of course, that fund this work. And the RIC program, the Regional Innovation Clusters program that Tony mentioned, that's a great one from SBA. You also have the Accelerator fund competition at SBA as well. But we see a lot of groups going after the Build to Scale program, of course, at Commerce. USDA has programs. Department of Energy has started doing more work to invest in clean energy incubators and things of that nature. At the state level, there are a lot of really great and different types of models that we see. Depending on your state, we see some that are able to directly provide line item funding to nonprofits. And so if you have some really great champions in your legislature, you might be able to get direct funding to do things like create a seed fund for your state. In nonprofit seed funds, we've seen do a lot of great work trying to de-risk deep technologies that don't lend themselves quite as well immediately to that kind of typical 7-year, get a 10x ROI type of return that private VCs might be looking for more of a software company. So again, those nonprofit or public support is very popular. See lots of interesting ways that joint industry and university R&D is being supported at the state level as well. And then in addition to that direct state funding, see a lot of programs being created at the state level that can fund different types of nonprofit work. Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation has a very cool kind of state version of EDA's Built to Scale, where they provide, it's less funding, but they provide great and important support to different types of entrepreneur support organizations around the state. Again, Missouri has that program that's funding creative manufacturing initiatives that they've supported over the past few years. You see a lot of SBR matching programs, of course, and phase 0 assistance and all sorts of great creative programs out there. I mean, Stacey, I definitely take your point that a lot of times the federal government is more willing to put in money when there's not that much of a match. But when you think about all the variety of the state governments out there, there are just so many different types of initiatives depending on the state's needs and kind of who can end up being convinced to become a champion.
Yeah, it's different. With the state, it's just more of a feeling of boots on the ground, right? And we have an SBIR matching program as well, which is really great and it's very like high touch. I mean, all these ecosystems are high touch, but that's really great. Jen, a question to you came in from the audience. I mean, it's not directly to you, but I'm going to push it to you. What happens when the government, when there's a continuing resolution or when there's a government shutdown? Have agencies received the approved 2024 budgets yet? So what happens if you're setting up your whole life, maybe you got selected for an award and then it's like, oh, doesn't come.
Yes. Well, everybody just crossed their fingers that Congress passes a full budget in the next month or two here. But yes, SBA is, like all the other agencies, under a continuing resolution right now, which means we do not have our full FY 2024 budget. I will say the budget process is complicated, but I will say even in the event of a shutdown or other kind of hairy budget situation, there are some agencies that could be funded. So just to say that a shutdown isn't necessarily always like all or nothing. There are also programs that are funded out of different kind of budget without getting too wonky about it. So some of it is kind of 1-year money versus 2-year money versus some budgets continue even in the event of a shutdown. For example, like a lot of our disaster assistance, for example, is separate from the kind of day-to-day work. So mostly just have faith in government and that we will figure it out eventually. And hopefully, we can continue all of the great momentum that is happening now around a lot of these programs. But yeah, I'm rooting for a full budget, just like everybody else.
For sure. I think that was a great question. And just to sort of summarize what they said, you hope for a good budget, but a lot of things continue, even though in the newspaper they call it a shutdown. It's not that simple. So I guess some key takeaways. I'm going to wrap it up here because we're at the 1 minute mark. Thank you all so much for showing up today and sharing your stories. I think the key takeaways is keep looking at the federal grants opportunities. There's some that are still open. There's many, many vehicles that are open. There's new instruments, there's strategic capital, there's this and that. Build a top to bottom ecosystem, include the bigs, include the smalls, make sure it's self-sustainable, make sure it's aligned with your state goals, leverage your small business development center, your local SBA offices, and then learn to communicate clearly. And what we sometimes just call managing upwards, right? So speaking to legislatures, speaking to people who can be your champion at the state level, you may even wind up with a line item in the budget, and keep going with that for quite a while you build something self-sustainable. Any last thoughts, folks?
Wonderful recap, Stacy.
That was great. Thank you.
Just watch out. You'll have to write reports. Another reason why you need Jason's company. There's a lot of report writing. All right. Thank you all. We're at the 4 o'clock hour.
Thank you,
All
Stacy.
right. Thank you, Stacy, Jason, Jen, and Tony. Let's give our panel an emoji or GIF round of applause. All right, everyone. We're at the end of our time for day 1 programming of the 3rd annual SBA Innovation Ecosystem Summit. A huge shout out to everyone who used the hashtag ESO Summit 2023 and Seed the Future. This is the end of my time with you today. It has been my privilege to fellowship with you all, and I will see you tomorrow. We're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back at 4:05 p.m. Eastern, our Acting Deputy Associate Administrator, Jennifer Shee, and our Director of Ecosystems, Brittany Sickler, will close us out.